The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with, even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the second day of this 8-day session here at Mountain Gate in honor of the Buddha's own enlightenment experience. It was the first session ever that he unfolded. And as you know the story, he sat determined to search inward until he found his answers. And 7 nights and 8 days later, he saw the morning star and everything broke open because he had gone so deep and asked so many wordless questions. He had tried 6 years of ascetic practice, which was the spiritual practice of the era back then, and is still something that people do in India these days. It's not advised for us. There are simply more effective ways to do practice. And he was the one that showed us the way. So his sesshin began when he realized that if he continued with the ascetic practice, he would die. And he realized that without a body, he would have no way of getting an answer to these probing questions that really had shocked him. They might not be as much of a shock to us today because we're a little bit more accustomed to either being sick or getting sick or knowing other people that have gotten sick. When people have accidents and are killed, that is still a shock to us. But for him, not having experienced any of that, not sickness, not old age, not death, and suddenly in 3 different nights, seeing each one of these in action, seeing an old person who had almost no teeth left and was bent over, and what hair there was gray and feeble. And then the next night, seeing someone who was sick, and he had never been sick himself and never knew anybody else who was sick. Somehow, whether these people were spirited away while they were sick or what, but he was kept in ignorance of the fact that people do get sick. And then the next night he saw a corpse, and that's very easy to see in India. When Sozui Sensei and I were traveling to India, we were in India for almost a month at a conference of Western ordained Buddhist women. And the last night, as we were driving in a taxi to Gaya to catch the train to Delhi on our way back to Japan, actually first to Singapore and then to Japan, we did pass a corpse in the road, right alongside the road. And there were other experiences with death during that 3.5 weeks there in India. In America, we don't see this as much. And in fact, people tend to, less so nowadays, thankfully, but when I was growing up, it was common that you just didn't take children to funerals, for example. And often the casket was closed, or if it was open and there was a child there, the child was told that grandpa was sleeping. Anything to avoid, I guess, the questions about what happens when we die. And yet that's a fundamental question for humanity, and one that is very powerful when asked deeply within beyond words, and it can result in amazing freedom for each one of us that has opened to that profound truth of what life and death really is. So in the beginning, he had all the kinds of experiences that we also have in the beginning of our sesshins, particularly in our early years of practice. He had tremendous pain. It was expressed as a metaphor of Mara calling upon his hordes of demons to hurl boiling mud and spears and lances at the Buddha, which represents the pain that we can experience as well, sitting long hours when we're not accustomed to it. And prior to that, there were the tempting visions that Mara also, Mara representing the part of us that really doesn't want to leave the status quo. And so the Buddha was tempted by visions of beautiful dancing women. And that didn't work to distract him. Neither did the pain and suffering that was caused by the boiling mud in the spears and lances. And then, of course, Mara hurled his final insult, his final attempt to pull the Buddha off his quest. And that was something that we also have to deal with in our daily life and in our practice as well. You don't have what it takes. You can't do this, said Mara. And that is when the Buddha supposedly touched the earth as witness that he was worthy. And each one of us is worthy. There's no doubt about it. Each one of us can experience the very same awakening to the profound truth of life, death, and existence that the Buddha did. And that is what we're doing. We're working towards in coming to sesshin. Sesshin, of course, being a time when we have set aside this very precious period of time in which to concentrate fully on that mission. We're called upon to do it because there's something within us that deeply needs to know, that deeply yearns to become free. And as well, that there's some level of faith as that we can, and indeed we can. We have this wonderful practice, the Sosokan, we have the Koan practice, we have meditation, various different forms of meditation, but in particular, the extended out breath is most powerful to actually do this. And we can work on it day after day and gradually go deeper and open more to that truth. And it's not something where there are obvious milestones. It's not like driving along the highway and counting telephone poles or logging miles and seeing the miles drop away as you reach closer to your destination. And that is one of the probably the most fundamental difficulty and the fundamental benefit, curiously enough, of Zen practice is that there are no signs that you're going in the right direction or going in the wrong direction or making progress or backtracking or anything else. This is why it's so vital to work with a teacher, because a teacher has been there ahead of you and has worked with their teacher and has an idea, actually has a direct perception of when a person is going in the right direction and can encourage and guide. A teacher is simply just one who has been there a little bit ahead of each one of us, and that has its benefits. So again, as usual, since this is Rohatsu Sesshin, we will share day 2 of Hakuin's Rohatsu exhortations as translated by Norman Waddell, the most amazing translator of Hakuin. and a very beautiful human being as well. So this is the second night. The master said, the Shurangama Sutra says that when a person returns to truth with a capital T, in the attainment of the way, everything in all the 10 directions, including empty space itself, vanishes without a trace. Anywhere people engage in the practice of the way, protecting deities and obstructing deities are also present. It is like crowds gathering in towns and cities and drawing thieves there as well. When a student's mind is focused firmly in the great vow of universal salvation, the protecting deities gain strength. But when the mind begins to waver and impede itself, it is obstructing deities who strengthen. It is thus absolutely essential that you begin your practice by arousing the great Bodhisattva vow, focusing your mind with selfless humility on the suffering of sentient beings, rooting it in the fervent prayer that each and every one of them reach the deliverance of enlightenment. No one has ever attained full realization of the great way of the Buddha who has not inspired by the power of this vow. It is like the practice of archery. You won't hit the center of the target the first or second time you shoot an arrow. But in time, if you continue to practice diligently, you are sure to grasp the knack. In practicing Zen, it is the same. A great burning resolve must well up at each and every instant of thought, focusing all your energy on penetrating the profound source of the Buddha way. When you are able to do this without wavering for even a single instant of thought, the Dharma truth cannot help manifesting itself in its entirety before your eyes. You will arrive at the Buddha's supreme enlightenment with less effort than it takes to reach down and pick up a piece of dirt at your feet. Now let's go through this again, because there's some things that may have caused at least some of you a little bit of pause. The Shurangama Sutra says that when a person returns to truth in the attainment of the way, everything in all the 10 directions, including empty space itself, vanishes without a trace. And that refers to samadhi, which is a prerequisite for coming to awakening. And there are various different kinds of samadhi. When, for example, we're engrossed in a movie and we forget ourselves and sort of become the movie, that's a kind of samadhi. There is samadhi when you're so involved in a sport that you forget yourself. But this is a deeper level of samadhi that Hakuin is speaking of. It's a samadhi where simply everything disappears, including any self-awareness. And this is sometimes called the Great Death. It's also a point in our practice where a great fear can come up ahead of that, because if we let go, if we disappear, are we going to be able to come back? Or are we going to be forever lost, wandering in some strange realm? And so it can be a time of fear. We are afraid at certain points in our practice, simply as we begin letting go, because our self-image, this sense of who we are, this set of ideas, this set of stories of who we are, is something that we are invested in, and invested in at sometimes great cost. And here I think about the stockbrokers who, during the great crash in 1929, were so aghast that they literally threw themselves out windows to die, rather than face the public and admit that maybe they hadn't done something right, or that the whole market had crashed, or whatever. And this is a an example of how strong the self-image can be. Murders take place because people are invested in a self-image. All kinds of pain and suffering occurs because of investment in the self-image. And the self-image is tenacious. We have a lot of good reasons for it. We are shamed when we do things that the adults feel are not appropriate, or they just get angry at us and blame us for things anyway, regardless. And so our whole ability to survive sometimes is called into question when that self-image is impacted. So it is something that as we continue to do our practice, we begin to see where it's not accurate. We begin to see through it. And as we begin to see through it, we become little by little free of the tyranny of it. But in order to have a Kensho experience, we have to let go so completely of that conscious awareness of who we think we are, that we do, in essence, seem to disappear. And that is that profound samadhi that he is talking about, where everything disappears. And then we come back to life again. But when we come back to life again, it's different. Something has let go. Anywhere people engage in the practice of the way, protecting deities and obstructing deities are also present. It is like crowds gathering in towns and cities and drawing thieves there as well. When a student's mind is focused firmly on the great vow of universal salvation, the protecting deities gain strength. But when the mind begins to waver and impede itself, it is the obstructing deities who strengthen. And it can be a tug of war for quite a long time until we sort of get that these different mind states, some of them painful, some of them frightening, whatever, some of them blissful, which isn't any more helpful than something that's frightening, are just simply passing clouds, floating through the mind, and have no basis in any solidity, any reality themselves. And then things are different for us. It is thus absolutely essential that you begin your practice by arousing the great bodhisattva vow, focusing your mind with selfless humility on the suffering of sentient beings, rooting it in the fervent prayer that each and every one of them reach the deliverance of enlightenment. And that is known as bodhicitta, the desire, the great desire to come to awakening for the benefit of all beings. No one has ever attained full realization of the great way of the Buddhas who was not inspired by the power of this vow, and that vow is tremendously powerful. We recite the 4 bodhisattva vows every day, and at the end of teisho, for one thing, and they are each time recited, go deeper into our being and reflect a greater level of commitment. And it's important to keep this in mind, these vows in mind. We do this practice not for ourselves. We do it for all beings. And this is vital. It is like the practice of archery. You won't hit the center of the target the first or second time you shoot an arrow. But in time, if you continue to practice diligently, you are sure to grasp the knack. In practicing Zen, it is the same. A great burning resolve must well up at each and every instant of thought. Well, sometimes a great burning resolve seems to have vanished. Nonetheless, with faith, we continue, even if it seems like the practice is dry. we continue, because at some level, we have this sense that if we just persist, we will become free. When you are able to do this without wavering for even a single instant of thought, the Dharma truth cannot help manifesting itself in its entirety before your eyes. You will arrive at the Buddha's supreme enlightenment with less effort than it takes to reach down and pick up a piece of dirt at your feet. It is a process, and that's important to recognize. Yeah, this is not a one-shot deal. This is a process coming to awakening. And every step of the way, every breath makes a difference. Every moment you try to focus your mind, every moment you extend that out breath, reaching farther beyond words and not even knowing what you're reaching for. Sure, we can call it your face before your parents were born, or your true nature, or a moo, or the sound of one hand, or any other name. But that's a name until you experience it. And sometimes it takes some convincing to keep going. But as you keep going, it makes a difference. No matter what it feels like to you, it makes a difference. So keep going. And now I'd like to share something, one of Hakuin's writings that I have shared before, but it's also apt now in concert with yesterday's teisho about fear and anxiety. He speaks of an elderly monk who had a kensho and sort of didn't go any further than that, partly apparently because he didn't have a teacher. And again, this is so important, this subject of post-satori practice and the long maturation. It is not something that is commonly spoken of, but it is so absolutely vital. So here is what Hakuin says. In the Shotoku era, which was 1711 to 1715, there was a priest in Edo, which is Tokyo these days, who called himself Zenkai. He is said to have been a nephew of Mitra-roshi, whoever that is. He began his Zen practice at the age of 23 and experienced a kensho. Unfortunately, however, he did not encounter a real teacher and never learned about post-satori practice. Attached to the understanding he'd attained, he continued to practice, quote, withered tree sitting, close quote. But he lamented how difficult it still was for him to control the workings of his mind. And he decided to enter the mountains of Kumano on the Kii Peninsula, cut himself off from the outside world and devote himself to an austere training regimen. On his way, he passed through Awano in Mino province, thinking to stop for a while with several priests of his acquaintance who were residing there. Meeting Zenkai and seeing the strength he had attained in his pursuit of the way, his friends were more than glad to take him in when he arrived. But they were dismayed when they heard of his plan to proceed into the forests of Kumano. They urged him to find a quiet hermitage in Mino. Zenkai agreed and gave up his idea of going to Kumano altogether. It is a thousand pities that because a student fails to encounter a genuine teacher at the beginning of his training and remains ignorant of the practice that continues after satori, he will delight in immersing himself in the pure existence of this kind, cut off from the world. And if you're familiar with the ox herding pictures, which is a kind of visual map of practice, there's a point where the the person who is seeking for the ox has found the ox, and that is represented by an enso, which of course is up there on the scroll behind me, which represents our true nature. So this monk has seen into his true nature. But that is not the final picture in these ox herding pictures. The final picture is when he goes off into the marketplace. It's expressed as with bliss bestowing hands. He goes back into society to do what he can to relieve suffering. And this is our Mahayana Zen practice. It is a thousand pities that because a student fails to encounter a genuine teacher at the beginning of his training and remains ignorant of the practice that continues after Satori, he will delight in immersing himself in a pure existence of this kind, cut off from the world. Engaged in such profitless, silent meditation, he focuses intently on ridding his mind of thoughts. And that's not what practice is. It's not about getting rid of thoughts. When we focus deeply, thoughts naturally diminish. And we can even reach a point where we can choose whether or not to bring a thought forth or not. But it's not about getting rid of thoughts. It's about being so present in the moment that one is able to discern immediately which direction to move in, what to say, what to do. It's clear and obvious. Sometimes the time is not right yet for a particular decision to be made, and we can sort of tune in, and it may be revealed right away, but it may not be revealed for another day or two. But eventually, if we stay tuned in, it will. And it will always bring us in the right direction. For 40 years, Zenkai continued to reside in the hermitage he built in Mino. With growing age, his resolve began to falter. His heart grew weary, and he found that the more he tried to sweep thoughts from his mind, the more confused his mind became. Although having lived to a considerable age as a Buddhist priest, as death approached, his fears of the sufferings that lay ahead in the next world remained. He began quietly to recite the Nembutsu. That's Namo Amida Butsu. I placed my faith in Amida Buddha. When in time he came to regard this as a rather roundabout way of reaching awakening, he started repeating his own name instead, Zenkai, Zenkai, over and over. Sounds like he's losing it a bit. But that's because he hasn't had any guidance. Where had the original attainment he had experienced as a young monk gone? Now his nights were plagued by bad dreams, his days tormented by troubling thoughts. Hakuin has a wonderful way with words. He visited various Buddhist teachers seeking their advice on how to break through this impasse, and they told him he was suffering from Zen sickness and could offer him no help. He took to moping about and doing zazen with tears in his eyes. One priest, feeling pity for him, said, "Why don't you go to Tsuruga and see Master Kokurin," who is another name for Hakuin. "I'm sure he will be able to help you." With considerable difficulty, owing to his great age, the priest made his way to my temple in Tsuruga and earnestly requested an interview. The monk who received him came to my chambers with a smile on his face. A grubby old priest with a broken down old pilgrim's case on his back just showed up, he reported. His hair is tangled like mugwort. He has a filthy face, and his robe and sedge hat are in tatters. He requested an interview with you in a gruff accent of the Bando region. Will you see him? I said, "Tell him I'm sick. Give him something to eat and then send him on his way." Then I heard a voice shouting loudly from outside the gate. I'm an old man. I'm over 80 years old. I had a very long trip to come here. Are you going to pretend you're sick and just send me away? Where is your compassion? Oops. I had little choice but to grant his request. He came into my chambers. I suffered for years from Zen sickness, he blustered. Please, master, in your great compassion, do something, help me. Tell me about your Zen sickness. What's it like? I asked. I'm troubled by thoughts in the daytime. At night, I have dreams, he replied. Do you know what is having these, what is having these troubling thoughts? I asked. Stop, please. I can't bear to think about emptiness, he said. What's wrong with thinking about emptiness? I asked. If a person attaches to emptiness, he will surely fall into hell. Come a little closer. I'm going to free you from your suffering. I'm certainly glad to hear that, he said, and drew towards me. Do you know how many hells exist for someone attached to emptiness? I asked him. No, I don't know that, he replied. There are 86. I want you to go down into hell right now and distribute yourself among all 86. Wordless, the priest stared pie-eyed at me. Come on, get down into there. Priests are supposed to save you from hell. What kind of teacher would try to send you? He cried. You say you're from Kanto, but it seems you've never heard what Suzuki Sho-san said. The direct, rough-hewn spirit of Kanto is very close to Zen. If you were really a Kanto priest, you should be able to jump into hell without a second thought. Kanto, by the way, is a region in Japan that includes Tokyo. Get down there and explore these hells one by one. There's not a single hell I haven't fallen into. He abruptly prostrated himself before me, his eyes filled with tears. What a great and wonderful teacher you are, Master Hakuin, he said. Your compassion has liberated me, allowed me to break completely free from my delusions. I feel as though I have suddenly awakened from a terrible dream. There's no way I can describe the joy I now feel. He prostrated himself 20 or 30 times, crying and laughing all the while. He then left, returned to the guest quarters, latched the door shut, and went to sleep. The next morning, Zenkai approached me with a broad smile on his face. I asked him whether he had seen any bad dreams during the night. I hadn't enjoyed a sound sleep for over 40 years, he said, but last night I slept like a log. It's the difference between a mediocre physician who always doles out the same medicine to his patients and a great one who prescribes a purgative in just the right time. If you had not applied that purgative just when you did, how could you have saved me from that terrible sickness? And then he continued to do prostrations before Hakuin. The real message here is to walk right in. No matter what the seeming mind state, be curious about it. Open to it. Even if it's a terrible feeling one, even if it's great fear, walk in as far as you can. When it gets to be almost too much, back out. But then later walk back in again. Open increasingly. And as you continue this practice, going into those 86 hells, one by one, you will find that little by little, any fear of hell dissolves. And little by little, you will become free so that it won't matter what mind state comes forth. And actually, what happens then is like happened to old Zenkai. The mind states won't come forth. They'll diminish in power, and eventually At least some of them will just simply disappear and not come forth anymore. And continue, and more of them will do the same. The only way to become free is not to turn your back on what you're fearing or what you're caught in, but to walk right in, to feel it in your body as the energy that it is, to stay out of the stories, because stories can't do anything in terms of releasing you from suffering. Well, I wouldn't say anything, because for certain circumstances, certain situations, albeit rather limited ones, talk therapy can make a difference. But the real therapy takes place, the real freedom takes place when we can give ourselves to walking right into the quaking fear. And it's amazing. It really is miraculous what can happen. And now we've got 6.5 more days in which to do that. How fortunate we are. Let's get going and take full advantage of it. I thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.